inside the mind of people who love violent songs. Introduction. Music is the universal language of humanity. It transcends barriers of culture, geography, and time. Yet what music reveals about us is not always flattering. People do not only flock to love ballads or uplifting hymns. They are also captivated, sometimes overwhelmingly so, by songs that depict aggression, conflict, and outright violence. This attraction is not confined to a niche group. It spans across genres, cultures, and generations. From ancient war chants to modern hip-hop anthems, violent songs attract massive audiences. Far from being outliers, the people who love such songs represent the majority of humankind. This essay explores the psychological and philosophical underpinnings of that fact. Why do humans love violent songs? Why do people celebrate music that describes killing, fighting, or rebelling against authority? What does this preference reveal about human nature itself? The discussion draws from evolutionary psychology, neuroscience, philosophy, sociology, and cultural studies. It will also analyze a specific case, Warren G's 1990s adaptation of I Shot the Sheriff. That track, which narrates the killing of a law enforcement figure, became widely popular and admired despite, or precisely because of, its violent core. By examining violent music as both psychological catharsis and cultural artifact, we can address deeper questions. Is the human being inherently a creature of violence? Do we secretly long to return to primitive states of existence where violence ruled survival? And why do people hate laws, even though laws are supposed to keep order? These questions not only explain the success of violent songs, but also illuminate the paradox of civilization itself. We strive for peace, yet we celebrate violence in art. The human mind and violence. Evolutionary psychology, violence as survival. To understand why violent songs resonate so strongly, one must start with human evolution. For millions of years, violence was not an aberration but a requirement. Early humans lived in environments where survival depended on the ability to defend against predators, hunt large animals, and compete with rival groups for resources. Aggression was adaptive. Those who were capable of decisive violence could secure food, territory, and mates. Those who lacked such capacity were often eliminated from the gene pool. From this perspective, the human brain evolved to be sensitive to violent stimuli. Aggressive acts carried life-or-death consequences, and attention to them could mean survival. Even today, people instinctively turn toward loud conflicts in public spaces. Our ancestors who ignored violence often did not survive long enough to reproduce. Thus, we inherit an attention bias toward aggression. Violent songs are modern echoes of this evolutionary legacy. They simulate conflict and survival scenarios in symbolic form, allowing listeners to experience the adrenaline of ancient struggles. The lyrics about shootings, stabbings, or fighting are not random. They tap into the brain's deeply rooted survival circuits. In a world where everyday life is comparatively safe and sanitized, violent music reawakens instincts that still lurk beneath the surface. Neuroscience, the brain on violence. From a neurological standpoint, violent songs are powerful stimulants. Aggressive lyrics and hard beats activate the amygdala, the brain's center for processing fear and threat. At the same time, the nucleus accumbens, associated with pleasure and reward, releases dopamine in response to emotionally intense stimuli. This dual activation creates a cocktail of arousal and pleasure, explaining why listeners may feel both excited and gratified when immersed in violent music. Neuroscientists have also found that violent or aggressive media does not always increase violent behavior. Instead, it can serve as catharsis. For example, listening to a song about killing an enemy may allow a listener to symbolically express anger at a boss, a teacher, or a political system without taking harmful real-world action. Music becomes a psychological sandbox where violent instincts can be played out safely. Hobbes versus Rousseau, the philosophical debate. Philosophers have long wrestled with the nature of human violence. Thomas Hobbes, in Leviathan, 1651, famously described life in the state of nature as solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. For Hobbes, humans are inherently violent and need strong social contracts to prevent mutual destruction. In contrast, Jean-Jacques Rousseau argued in the 18th century that humans were naturally peaceful, noble savages, corrupted by civilization into violence. Violent songs resonate with both sides of this debate. On one hand, their popularity affirms Hobbes's claim: aggression is deeply rooted, and people delight in its artistic expression. On the other hand, violent songs often romanticize rebellion against laws and institutions, which aligns with Rousseau's view that civilization itself provokes violence by restricting freedom. When people sing along to "I Shot the Sheriff," they are not only embracing violence as entertainment, but also imagining escape from Hobbesian law into Rousseau's dream of primal freedom. Violence as identity and storytelling. Violence is not just biological, it is cultural. From Homer's Iliad to Shakespeare's tragedies to modern gangster rap, violent narratives have always formed the backbone of compelling storytelling. Why? Because violence heightens stakes. A story without conflict feels flat. A story with mortal danger commands attention. Violent songs provide a condensed narrative identity. To declare "I shot the sheriff" is to position oneself as an outlaw, a rebel, an individual unwilling to submit. Fans who sing along do not literally commit violence, they adopt the symbolic role of the rebel. Violence becomes metaphorical, a way of asserting freedom, selfhood, and defiance against authority. The psychology of music and violence. Music as an emotional amplifier. Music is unique among art forms in its capacity to bypass rational filters and stimulate emotion directly. Rhythm, melody, and harmony affect physiological states, heart rate, hormone release, and mood regulation. When violent lyrics are paired with aggressive beats, the emotional impact intensifies. The listener feels not just told, but transporting into a world of conflict and defiance. Catharsis theory, safe release of aggression. The Greek philosopher Aristotle described tragedy as cathartic. By watching or hearing violent acts in drama, audiences purged themselves of harmful emotions. Violent songs may function similarly. They allow listeners to express anger and aggression in a safe, ritualized format. A teenager screaming along with a metal track or rapping along with a gangster anthem may actually be calming themselves, not inciting real violence. The song acts as a psychological pressure valve. Identity, rebellion, and belonging. For many listeners, violent songs serve as more than entertainment. They are markers of identity. To embrace aggressive music is often to align with a subculture that resists mainstream norms. Punk, metal, and hip-hop all emerged as voices of rebellion for marginalized or disaffected groups. Violent lyrics become symbols of authenticity and solidarity. When a group chants the same words of aggression together, they transform private frustrations into collective empowerment. Why violent songs appeal to the majority. Historical roots, war chants, and rituals. Violent music is not new. Ancient tribes used war chants and drumming to prepare for battle. Songs celebrated the killing of enemies or the glory of warriors. These were not seen as deviant, but as necessary. Violence in music unified the group, motivated fighters, and reinforced cultural values. In many ways, today's violent songs are direct descendants of these ancient practices. Collective psychology, the crowd and aggression. When violent songs are performed in concerts or blasted at parties, they generate collective energy. The crowd moves as one, bodies synchronized by rhythm, voices united by aggression. Psychologists call this deindividuation, the merging of self into a larger group identity. In such contexts, violent lyrics are not frightening, but exhilarating, creating a sense of belonging and shared purpose. Modern parallels, hip-hop, rock, and metal. In modern culture, violent themes dominate several genres. Gangster rap narrates shootings, drug wars, and defiance against police. Heavy metal revels in dark, aggressive imagery. Rock anthems celebrate rebellion and destruction. These genres are among the most commercially successful in music history. Their popularity confirms that violent music appeals not to a small minority, but to the global majority. Is the human a creature of violence? The question cuts to the core of psychology and philosophy. Evidence suggests that humans are indeed predisposed to violence, but also uniquely capable of cooperation. Violence is part of our toolkit, not our only option. The evolutionary drive to compete exists alongside the drive to nurture. Yet violent songs reveal how central aggression remains in our imagination. Even in peaceful societies, people consume stories of conflict voraciously. The appetite for violent music suggests that while civilization tempers violence in reality, our inner landscapes remain shaped by it. Do people love to be primitive? Violent songs often romanticize primal states of existence, lawlessness, raw survival, unfiltered instinct. Civilization demands restraint, but art allows us to fantasize about its opposite. In this sense, violent songs let people indulge a longing to be primitive. The beat of drums, the chant-like chorus, the celebration of blood and defiance all recall ancient tribal rituals. Fans may not consciously desire to live in caves, but they find joy in temporarily returning, through song, to a world where instinct ruled. Why people hate laws? Laws exist to restrict violence, yet people often resent them. Why? Because laws limit freedom. They represent authority imposing rules on the individual. Songs that narrate defiance against law enforcement tap into universal frustrations with being controlled. I Shot the Sheriff exemplifies this. The sheriff symbolizes law, the shooter symbolizes freedom. Fans thrill to the fantasy of overthrowing authority, even if only in imagination. Case study: Warren G's I Shot the Sheriff. Origins of the song. I Shot the Sheriff was originally written and performed by Bob Marley in 1973, blending reggae rhythms with themes of resistance against unjust authority. Eric Clapton's 1974 cover turned it into an international hit. In the 1990s, hip-hop artist Warren G reinterpreted the song, infusing it with rap sensibilities and a West Coast urban edge. This adaptation recontextualized the song for a new generation, steeped in the realities of police conflict, gang violence, and systemic inequality. Why the song resonated? Warren G's version struck a chord because it dramatized a universal fantasy, resisting authority. The sheriff represents law, control, and oppression. Shooting the sheriff symbolizes reclaiming autonomy. Fans identified with this narrative whether or not they had personal conflicts with the law. The violent imagery provided catharsis, rebellion, and identity. In the 1990s, amid heightened tensions between communities and law enforcement, the song became an anthem of defiance. Admirers and cultural impact. The song's popularity reveals that audiences were not repelled by its violent content, they admired it. It became an anthem not of crime, but of resistance and authenticity. For listeners, singing along was not an endorsement of literal violence, but a symbolic act of empowerment. The massive admiration for Warren G's I Shot the Sheriff demonstrates how deeply people resonate with violent songs when those songs articulate rebellion against authority. Broader implications: violent songs and society. Violent songs pose a paradox. On one hand, they provide catharsis, allowing people to express aggression safely. On the other, they risk normalizing aggression and anti-authority sentiments. Whether they are harmful or beneficial depends on context, yet their popularity makes one thing clear: they are necessary. Violent songs reflect the human condition in its rawest form, conflicted, rebellious, and forever torn between law and freedom. Conclusion: humans love violent songs not because they are broken, but because they are human. Violence is woven into our evolutionary past, our neurological wiring, our cultural stories, and our philosophical debates. Songs that depict aggression allow us to reconnect with ancient instincts, explore rebellion against authority, and purge ourselves of anger. The case of Warren G. I Shot the Sheriff proves the point. Far from being shunned, violent music is admired and loved, precisely because it voices the fantasies and frustrations shared by the majority of people. Is the human a creature of violence? Yes, but not only that. Do people love to be primitive? In imagination, certainly. Why do people hate laws? Because laws restrain and humans dream of freedom. Violent songs thrive on these paradoxes, and their global popularity reveals the truth. Violence in music is not a marginal taste, but a mirror of humanity itself.